How's it going, everyone, and welcome to another awesome tutorial. My name is Nick, and today we are going to be creating a Bitcoin using Cinema 4D, Octane, and Photoshop. So the purpose of this tutorial is to learn the importance of UV mapping and how useful it is in 3D product renders and other objects. I'll go over on how to set up a UV map, preparing the UV map in Photoshop, and we texture, light, and render the Bitcoin in the end. So the reason I was excited in the previous tutorial, it was because of the Photoshop component and how Photoshop will play a huge role on this. But most of the work we're also going to be doing in Cinema 4D, setting up the UV map. So let's get the show on the road, shall we? So the first step into starting this tutorial is setting up the settings, or the Cinema 4D settings, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the render settings here, and I'm going to change it to Octane render. So then I'm going to change the width and the height to match 1080 by 1080. So already we got this set up, and one thing I want to do as well is to increase the opacity of these borders. So by pressing Shift V, we can go to View, and then by going to the opacity and change it to 90%, now we increase the opacity on the borders. Now, one other thing I want to do before I get started is set up an HDRi. So this is where the lighting comes in. So I'm going to go to Objects, HDRi Environment, go into the square box over here, because if you don't, then it's going to be blown out. And then we're going to go to Artist Workshop. That's usually my favorite one. It gives pretty good lighting. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a cylinder. So this is where we're going to go and make the coin. Now, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to decrease the height by dragging this down. So I think this is like at a pretty good level. And then another thing I'm going to do as well is I'm going to press T to scale and then decrease the size by dragging it to the left. And by going closer, we can already see. So I just want to make it almost to the same size of an actual coin. So it's about like 2 inches. So something like that is fine. So right away, when you look at this thing is really jagged, and we gotta fix that. So we're gonna go to Display, Grout Shading, so that way we can see our segments and our lines and our polygons. And one thing I want to do before we make this editable is go to the height segments, change that to 1. So this becomes 1. And then the rotation segments, I'm going to make it into 150. You can go above 150 if you want. If you want to make it more detailed, you can go right ahead and do that. I encourage you guys to play around with this thing, because that's what learning is all about. So it's about experimenting and having fun at the same time. So I'm going to turn on my Octane. I'm going to fire this up. And right away, we're getting some really nice shadows just from this. And I'm going to change the direct lighting to path tracing, because I feel like you get more realistic lighting just from that. And I'm just going to change a few things from my render settings. And I'm going to change the max samples to like 1,000. Well, not 1, but 1,000. And then change the GI clamp to 1 as well. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a plane. And then I'm going to lower this so that way it's sitting below the coin. And by pressing the middle mouse button, you can change the viewport just from that. So you can go to perspective, top, right, front, and you can just easily press that middle click button to easily change to any view you want. So I'm just going to go a little closer by pressing 2 and just doing that, and voila, now we have it planted onto the Bitcoin. Now, it doesn't have to be exact, but I like to be precise on this stuff. What we can also do is maybe increase the plane to like 1,000 by 1,000. Maybe make the width in the segments 1 and call this floor, and then call this Bitcoin. Cool. So now I'm just going to change the perspective of the camera angle so that way we can just look at our coin. Right now it's just a white coin. There's no texture on it whatsoever. Now usually once we make this editable, you're going to see what happens. So by pressing C, look at that. This already made a UV map for us, or a UVW tag. So before we delete this thing, let's just set up our coin before we start UV mapping this thing. So what I'm going to do is press on polygons, and you can see you can just like select the polygons. But to do this a lot easier and quicker, what we're going to do is we're going to press U and L, so that way we can select things so much easier. And I'm going to go a little closer so that way we can see what's going on. And the first thing I'm going to do is select the two circles. And the reason why is because I want to easily select this when I need to. So I'm going to go to select, set selection. So like, let's say for example, now I need to, you know, I made a mistake. Like I need to go back to those circles. I could just easily just double click or double left click and I'm already back. So that's really good to have. And now for the corners, this is where we're going to bevel it. So what I'm going to do is use the loop selection tool to select everything. And then by pressing I as a shortcut, we can just go closer. Now, if you have preserved groups on, you're going to get all of them at the same time. However, if you turn this off, you can individually change one at a time. So I think 0.1 is good. I'm satisfied with that. And because we have this already selected, we're going to press M and S to bevel. So now we have everything selected that we need to select, and we can just bevel this thing just like that. So now we're getting some really nice beveled corners for the coin. And so here you go. Now we have untextured Bitcoin. Now before I do anything, I'm just gonna raise this a little bit just so you know it doesn't really go through the floor. So now that we got our thing set up, I'm going to delete this UVW tag. So what I want to do is I want to change the interface of this thing and make it so that we can have like a UV map workspace. So what I'm going to do is go to layout and then go to BP UV edit. So by going to BP UV edit, automatically you have no UV whatsoever. So this square right here is where all, like, this is called the UV island. So once like you set up the texture over here, then it's going to appear here. So what I'm going to do is select this. So see how it automatically selected that for us without having to like do that again. We're going to go to this thing called Paint Setup Wizard. And look at this. So now we have two check marks. So what does that mean? So when you set this up, these two are going to be on the same UV island. But we don't want that. We just want the Bitcoin. So all we have to do is just check this off, go next. I don't really mess around with this. So go next. And over here, I'm going to set this to 4,000 by 4,000. And then when we finish, boom. Now we got a UV map. I'm going to delete this texture. So what I'm going to do as well, just to like make a new texture so that you guys can see how I do this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new texture by double clicking on the left corner. Click on this. And then you see that X right over here? I'm going to double click that. And I'm going to choose like a red background. I'm just going to make it a little darker so that way it's easier to see. And already you can see that we have a background for the UV islands. The thing is now we need to color the polygons so that when we take this to Photoshop, we can edit it. So one thing before we do that, we can go to optimal mapping so that way we can play around with the settings. So I encourage you guys to like play around with this stuff, get some different results. And if you go to realign, you just have to like keep applying. So see, because I don't want this to be in the corners. And one thing you can also do is like, let's say in the future you guys are working on a project, whether it's like packaging or 3D product renders, you can also choose these projections right here, like box, flat, frontal, so you get like different results. But I don't want to do that. I just want to go back to what I already have at the moment. So if we go to our layers, we have our background. So here's what I'm going to do now. So we're gonna, since we already have the polygon selected, we're gonna go to layer, new layer. We're gonna call this UV map, and then we're going to color by going to layer, fill polygons. We don't really want to mess around with this stuff, but we do want to mess around with the coin itself. So that's what we want to do. So now that this is all set up, we can go to File, Save Texture As. It's going to turn into a TIFF. And we can change the file name. We can call this Bitcoin UV. So this is good. And yeah, so now we can open up Photoshop. So let that load. Okay, cool. So now we're going to open, choose our Bitcoin UV. And since we only focused on these, that's what we're going to focus on. The one thing I want to do is change the background to black. So since I'm already in black and white, if you want to restart it, I think you can press D to like go back to the color. So if I choose this and press D, you see it goes back to black and white. So just a shortcut for you guys, if you want to like easily change a background or change any color whatsoever, if you press Alt and back, that's how you can easily change your background. So you don't have to like get the paint bucket tool and just splash that thing all over. So it's just a lot easier. And I'm going to call this BG for background. So now what we need to do, since we have this all set up for us, so go to File, Open, Cinema 4D, Cinema 4D. We're going to go to Personal Projects. Let's go to 3D Product, Cryptocurrencies, Reference. Okay, so this is going to be our reference. So you can find a lot of these images online. If you guys are making cryptocurrencies and stuff, like if you're planning on making any NFTs, you can just go on Google and find like try to find like a black and white version of a Bitcoin. But I'm also going to show you how to basically crop it out and like get it all set up. So first thing I'm going to do is unlock this, call this Bitcoin. I can't spell Bitcoin for the life of me. Okay, there we go. So now what I'm going to do is, I don't want this, but I do want this coin. So I'm going to press C and changing the ratio to 1:1 square. And then let's kind of bring this together. Now you can also delete the cropped pixels if you want, but you can check this off in case like maybe you make a mistake. So by holding Alt and scrolling inside, we can go a little closer. I don't want this to be too perfect, but just good enough. Okay, cool. So now I got it. So now what I want to do is, there's several ways you can remove a background. So if you have the newest addition to Photoshop, all you really need to do is remove the background and it does the work for you just like that. Like, it's like magic. The AI is insane. So if you don't have the new Photoshop, what I can do is show you various ways to go about it. So you could just delete this so I can show you guys. So what I want to do is, I want to get some sort of layout or grid, so that way you guys can see what's going on. So that way you can easily use the marquee tool to like select everything else. So by going to View, New Guide Layout, and already I have it set up. So all I did is a 2x2 row and column. I press OK. I guess I'm going to eye on this one. So what you could do is basically hold Alt and Shift and just basically remove it like that. So that's one way you guys can go about it. You can also use the not the magic wand tool. I wouldn't recommend that, but you can use the quick selection tool as well. So if you want to click on everything, I wouldn't recommend this because look how difficult this is already just to try to remove a background. So what I encourage you is just use the marquee tool, set up the lines, and then just easily take it out just like that. So what I'm going to focus on is the one that I already just removed. So what I'm going to do is take this. Actually, because you see that you see that line that was there before, I have to delete the crop pixels. So I'm going to do this again. Now remove the crop pixels. I don't want to do that. And just drag it by holding Shift. Oops. There you go. So now I brought this here, and now I'm going to align it to the UV island. So I'm just going to align it properly. By holding Alt. Maybe move it here. I'm also going to show you guys how to edit it and still like reload it in Octane, so that way, like, in case you like messed up, you don't have to put too much time like doing it all over again. So I'm going to duplicate this by holding Alt and Shift and just bring it down here, and also make sure that I align this properly as well. Yeah, something like that. But like I said, for the tutorial purposes, I'm kind of rushing this. So if you want to take a lot of time to putting this together, you may do so. So I'm going to call this one Bitcoin, can't spell, bottom, and then Bitcoin top. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group these and call them Bitcoin coins. And then the next thing I'm going to do, so just to get more detail out of this texture that we're making, so I'm going to go to levels. Where's levels? Here it is. So I'm going to go to levels, set it to the Bitcoin, and then I'm going to bring this down so that way we get more detail. And then you can also do the white, but if you do that, you see those lines, you're starting to lose those. So we don't want to lose those lines, but we do want to make some parts darker than other parts. So that way we can get more texture and detail from that. And so I think we are set and we are ready to load this into our texture. So go to Photoshop, and then yeah, save it here. And then now we can open up our Cinema 4D again. We can go back to our original layout. And so you see these things, we no longer need them. No. And I'm going to fire up our Octane over here. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a Octane material, but I'm going to use a metallic. So I'm going to set the metallic already. Now already, like, it's very reflective at the moment, but don't worry, we're going to fix that. So we're going to go to the Octane material, call this Bitcoin, and then go to the node editor. Now I want to raise the roughness a little bit so that way it's not too shiny. So 0.1 is fine. And then what I can do is bring an image texture. This is where we're going to set up our bump, and this is why we made the UV map in the first place. So by selecting the UV map and set the bump, now you can see it's all set up. And then maybe we can increase the roughness a little bit so that way we can see it a little better. And look at that. Now we got our Bitcoin. I'm gonna like lower the reflection a little bit because this is way too much. Let's see here. Lower the specular a little bit too. Oh yeah, that's one way you guys can go about it. And so I'm going to invert this thing because I like it to be inverted. You could also do the displacement as well and do it that way as well. So by making a copy by holding Control. So if we go to displacement, you can probably get like different results from doing this. Like see, this is already looking insane. So make this into 4K. So something like this, you can get like really different results. So let's say if you want to see the difference, so what I can do is go to Store Render Buffer, go back to this, take this off, and set that to the bump. And then if we scroll, now you can see like there's a huge difference here. I think I like the bump a lot better. I like the results of that. So I'm going to keep that. One thing I also want to do too is give it color. So by going to the RGB spectrum and go to specular, I want to change it to like a gold. So maybe something like this is totally fine. And I also want to bring some fingerprints just to kind of give it a little bit of a more realism. So by deleting this, let's go to image texture. Let's go to roughness. And then by going to the roughness channel, I'm going to my textures real quick. I'm just going to try to pick it out really quick. So here it is. So yeah, you'll get something like this, and I think this is looking really gnarly. So I'm really liking how this came out. And so I want to show you guys how to reload your texture in case like you mess up. So you see this, like I could probably improve that, right? So I can go to my Photoshop file. Let's say I can go to the top one, maybe move it, right? And move the bottom one as well. Maybe make it a little bigger, right? And so is the other one. So maybe what I can do is duplicate this just to save time and just align it accordingly. Something like that. Like I said, I don't want to spend too much time, but I'm going to show you this as an example. So once you save it, right? Now, automatically, you're not going to see the results, but what you can do is you can reload and see, you see the difference. So let me just turn this off. So that's how you can easily change in case like if you mess up on something, you can always go back to it and fix it. So one thing I want to do also is to maybe not put too much fingerprints. So what I can do is bring an Octane gradient, put this into the image texture. Now, Octane is not really friendly when it comes to like metal materials, so you can solo this. So what I do is I go to basic and then I go to diffuse. You're not going to see anything, but if I go solo, now you can see the texture. So what I can do is transform this a little bit. So let's make it smaller so that we could see. Right, like this. So maybe Something like that. And then we can disable it. Let's go back to not specular, metallic. And see, now we're getting a little bit of that shininess from this, so I'm really liking that. If you want to like do some trippy stuff, you can also play around with the film layer. So you get some really trippy results just from doing this. So if I want to like go 0.1, 0.2. It's really cool stuff. Okay. So I don't want to play around with this, so I'm just going to keep it the way it is. Let's refresh this. So now I'm going to set my camera. And then what I'm going to do before I set it up, I'm just going to bring a cloners because I want to clone so many of these. So I'm going to go to cloner. Make it into a child. Make the Bitcoin into a child of the cloner. And then I'm going to do a honeycomb array. Make sure this is Y. And decrease this to like 20 by 20. I don't think we can see it. Where'd it go? Oh, there they are. Okay, so maybe I can make it to 5 by 5. Maybe... yeah, something like that. Just give it a good angle. So to get a really good angle, for me, what works best is to set the camera to tele. And then just zoom back. And then now you already have like a really good angle. And you can always play around with the cloner to get like different results. And so... I think I like this, but just want to make sure before I do anything. See, it's not even touching the floor. So what I want to do is set a protection. So by going to rigging tags and protection, now no matter what, if I move around, it's not going to affect the camera. So I'm going to go back here, go to the different viewport, and go to... gotta bring it down here. So something like this is fine. And then if you want to like change some stuff, if you want to move the camera around, you can also do this. One thing I like to do to like really set a really good composition is by turning on the grid and also doing the golden section and setting the crosshair or the crosshair. And just setting it like this is really good. And just playing around with the settings. So something like this is really good. And let's say if I want to like rotate the HDRi, you can also do that as well. So I think this is fine. Yeah, so if we lower our camera, then things are... oh, wow, that's weird. I don't know how that increased. So I think this angle looks perfect. Let's try to zoom in a little bit just so we can get more focus on the coin. And let's focus on that individual coin itself. And then what we can do is put this back in case we mess up. Change the f-stop. So see, as I change the f-stop, this is going to blur everything else. So what I want to do is focus on this. But I want to increase the f-stop to maybe 4 or 5 or maybe even 8 because I don't want to blur it too much. Get like a different angle. Now that is looking really good. I'm really liking this so far. Okay, so now what I also want to do is give texture to the plane. So what I'm going to do real quick, just not to put a lot of time into it, I'm just going to bring an Octane glossy material and then bring the diffuse to like a black. So something like this, and then just go to the roughness, get an image texture real quick, set the roughness, and then bring like, I don't know, let's bring a fingerprints out too. And now it's starting to look really good. And instead, what we can do with this one is make this into a box. And then if we solo this, then we can see this a lot better. And we can bring down the scale. I don't know if you guys can see this, but you can see like we're affecting the scale just like that. So that's already looking really gnarly. I'm really liking how this is coming out. Very satisfied. The next thing I'm going to do, this is usually where the fun parts usually begins, is when we enable the camera imager and then the post-processing. And I love giving this a lot of bloom, just to give it a lot of light, and maybe increase the glare amount to maybe 4 and increase the blur a little bit by maybe like 0.03. And also the cutoff is really good too if you don't want too much bloom. So maybe like 0.1 or 0.2 is usually how I mess around with this stuff. And then for the response, you can really play around with this stuff. There's a lot of like cool selections here. Like this one in particular is usually my go-to, but if like, let's say I want like something different, like this one looks really good as well. So you can play around with this stuff. And you can also change the specular color. So like, let's say you want more of that specular. And then if we reload, but then you also want to change that color, maybe make it more orange. So we can do that. Something like that looks really good. All right. And so before we render this out, I'm going to go to my settings again, go to save, turn this into a 16-bit channel because we want to make this high quality. And then let's go to, I'm just going to put it on downloads for now because this is a tutorial. And I'm just going to call this Bitcoin tutorial. I don't want to replace it, but let's make it 01. So I'm going to put this here. Then we're going to render it. Now you can also increase the settings here if you want. So for example, if you want a max samples of 1600, you can do so. If you want a specular depth of 16, you can make that into 20. But like I said, the lower the numbers, the faster the render. So just to keep that in mind. And then if we render this out, there you go. So not only did you just learn how to UV map, we also played around with Photoshop and how to prepare the UV itself. And then we brought it back into Cinema 4D, set it up into Octane render, and we played around with Octane render just to get different looks. And I'm loving it. Like, this is really cool. I had a lot of fun putting this together again. So like I said, I hope you guys learned something from this tutorial. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you guys have an awesome day. Take care.